3000.
What is doing? My name's Maloney. This is the 3000 podcast. I'm joined today by an artist and a podcaster, Jack Rowland from the In Too Deep podcast. Thanks for coming, man.
Thanks for having me, man. It's a pleasure to be here.
I think I know the answer to this question, but do you enjoy being on the other side of the mic?
Yeah, don't mind it. It's definitely a very different experience. You don't have to do any prep, which is awesome. But yeah, the spotlight's on, you know. I'm not used to being in front of the camera. That's the difference.
Yeah, but you do all of your episodes, and if you've done 100 and how many?
185 now, I think.
That's a lot, man.
Yeah, it's getting up there.
And for all those episodes, you've definitely been on camera, though.
Right, yeah.
Not for
all the Zoom
of them,
ones.
for a lot of them.
All the Zoom ones. But, you know, just looking at my computer screen, so it feels different.
Yep.
Yeah.
Not that IRL experience.
Exactly that.
All right, so we'll get into the podcast stuff, but we've got to start with your personal journey first. So you're an artist as well. Where did you sort of grow up and where did you find art that then got you into this sort of podcast game?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the southern suburbs of Melbourne, grew up in Elstonwick, you know, kind of pretty normal upbringing, you know, middle class kind of life. No horrific stories that shaped me. But yeah, no, I you know, just like probably most artists, just as soon as I could pick up a pencil, draw, everything was drawing, just monsters and all sorts of crazy stuff. And yeah, you know, it was probably not the best student at school at all, definitely not the best student. And then, you know, eventually kind of made my way to university, getting into fine art at university, which was a very rude awakening because, you know, you go from being like the best in your class to then joining all these other people that are the best, exactly best in their class, and then you're not the best. And I was young, straight out of school, pretty much. So I think at the time the unis were very much they didn't want to take people straight out of school. They'd prefer mature age students and stuff, people who had a bit more understanding of themselves and what they want to make art about. And I definitely was, you know, just like still growing up, really. So
that's a common thing in art and design where they want you to do year 13, build your folio, so you're not coming in so green out of like high school.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. I would have got a lot more out of the degree if I did it later in life, but at the same time, I might not be a professional artist if I didn't do the degree. So yeah, it definitely had its benefits. I struggled. I nearly failed every year.
Did you feel young compared to your classmates?
Oh, there was a few other, you know, I definitely wasn't the only person my age. So but you know, I mean, at the time I was really into hip hop and stuff, and I was a very good drawer, but pretty much the extent of my art was just copying album covers. So, you know, I'd just like copy an NWA album cover or even like the old Limp Bizkit album cover or, you know, something. Or I think the one of the first, maybe Slim Shady LP had all these cool graphics in there. So that was the extent of kind of my conceptual development in terms of art at that point, which the lecturers did not take all that kindly to. So yeah, got through it.
But that's how you learn. You copy. Yeah. You've got to learn. That's how you learn.
Yeah, totally. It wasn't until third year uni was probably where I really started to get my stride, and that was all due to a music festival called Rainbow Serpent Festival, where I went and took quite a bit of acid and melted my brain.
What year was this?
That would have been maybe like, I can't remember, but probably like 2008 or something. Yep. I'd say it was 2008 going into 2009. And yeah, that's kind of where it was like, it was actually quite a difficult trip.
Literally.
Yeah. And, but you know, a lot of, you know, the spotlights are aimed back at myself, you know, and there's a lot of like, whoa. And basically coming out of that, just being extremely curious again, extremely invigorated by life, by the natural world. You know, very cliche, but after the big acid trip, wanting color, we need color. Let's like, we need to celebrate life. We need color. The natural world is incredible. And that was probably the beginning of my first paintings that were, you know, the beginning of the style that I do now, which are these very kind of psychedelic influenced, bright colored, technicolored landscape painting, which is probably much more about celebrating the natural world these days than back when I began, it was very much about psychedelia, and that's still a big foundation of my work. But just like,
It's an interesting take on landscapes because landscapes generally are pretty drab and monotone and natural colours. So to flip that and to make them Technicolor is an interesting take on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of like landscapes and portraits, the most done to death genres in in art history.
Yeah.
I always love it when you could find a portrait artist or someone working in those very traditional genres and still trying to figure out a way of making it your own or putting your own spin on it. I appreciate a lot of classical kind of parts of art and music. So yeah.
When you talk about portraits, if you could pick an artist to paint your portrait, anyone
paint my portrait?
Paint your portrait. Anyone can do it. Who would you pick?
Oh, good question. I actually had artist buddy of mine, Ash Coates. He's his work's real trippy, and he did a portrait of me, which was cool, with all these mushrooms growing out of my head and stuff. It was pretty cool. That was awesome. I wasn't expecting to really like a portrait of myself ever, but good question. I have to put a bit more thought into that. There's quite a few pretty good portrait artists in Melbourne. Adnate being an obvious one, or I'll get back to you on a better answer.
I'll follow that one up. So then you go to Rainbow, you indulge, you come back with a different mindset. Your art starts to take a different direction, but you're still studying fine art.
Yeah,
which fine art and studying is an interesting one, isn't it? Like, because you don't have to study it, but you can.
Totally. Yeah, there's mixed feelings about the fine art degree. I think there's a lot of wankery that's there, but I really didn't like it. I was very excited to get out of it, but as the years have gone on, I think I really do actually see the value in doing a fine art degree. I think it really did force me into those really annoying questions of like, well, why are you making the artwork you're making? Which I think it does help you take it up a notch and give your work the scrutiny that it probably needs. I think there is a jump between that kind of high school mentality and then trying to jump into a professional career. And I think it is important to, put your work under the, a fine comb and ask yourself, is this a successful work? Just because you did it isn't always enough. Like sometimes you do have to, I don't know. I like art where there's a bit more guts to it than just a pretty picture,
There's something kind of cool about the naivety of somebody who didn't study fine art, the way that they do it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's no right or wrong way. I'm not, again, by no means was I a good student or anything. I'm far from any kind of other end of the scale from an academic. I just, but yeah. I mean, I can think of a million artists that didn't study that are incredible careers as well. A lot of the street artists that have really broken into the fine art world that against all like the fine art world never used to have that. Now the Archibald, you've got Scotty Marsh, you've got Adnate, Roan's bloody taken over museums and things, and I think it's great. I think it's wonderful that it's broadened into that kind of it's broadened into a different direction. It's great.
And as long as it's not just a trend that these sort of art people are jumping on, that's the thing that's a bit of a concern, I think, when they embrace that stuff. They're like, oh, this is a new movement. Let's just suck the life out of it for a bit and then we'll piss it off. Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
So, hopefully it's there to stay and they embrace it for
Absolutely. I mean, some street art or graffiti art, whatever, translates much better or much less successfully to the canvas than others. It doesn't always translate perfectly. But I'm glad it's getting more attention and more eyes on it and more appreciation.
Yeah. And if nothing else, at least it's showed people that you can have gallery showings, you can have a body of work that doesn't just consist of canvases. It can be all sorts of mixed media, whatever it is.
Totally, yeah. I think one of Roan's early shows when I was chatting to him on my podcast was I think he was doing a lot of portraits in abandoned buildings, but the kind of finished art, because they would all get smashed down, the finished artwork was he'd get really good photographers to come, and it was essentially a photography exhibition. So he wasn't bringing he has done that, but he wasn't bringing the work to canvases. That wasn't it was about the environment. It was about the portraits. I think that's a really cool, successful way to translate it to the gallery world.
Mm-hmm. Mm. And so, getting back on your personal journey, you finish your degree. Then, this is a thing that I'm guessing pretty much every art student ever faces. Okay, now what do I do?
Totally. I mean, I was ready to pack it in because I didn't do well at uni. I was like, cool, gave it a shot.
But you finished.
I finished, and
that's an achievement in itself.
Yeah, I was happy with that. It was probably at the end. I was at RMIT, and they had an art prize that I paid so little attention to. I didn't even know it was like the Tolano Hotel. They come in and they would award one artwork $1,000 and maybe buy a few for their hotel. I didn't even know what it was, and then at the kind of graduation event, they awarded it to me, and I was just like, "Wait, what? I don't know." And
is it a landscape scenario?
Yeah. My colourful psychedelic landscapes. They like cool, awesome.
It does lend itself well to a hotel, though.
Right. But I think that was probably the moment where I was like, "Oh, people, like my work. Okay, cool." And that. The money is cool, but above the money, it was the validation, acknowledgement, and from then I think I got asked to be in a couple of group exhibitions, and then I got a studio, and I just thought, okay, like it really was just that encouragement above a sale that made a world of difference for me. Yeah,
and it is. I think you find that with a lot of artists, not just visual artists, musical artists, whatever they're into. Whether they're filmmakers, they need that sort of little tick of approval from somebody to think, all right, there is some sort of commercial appeal. I can make this into a career.
Totally.
And that was your little moment.
100%. And I think I was lucky enough to make a few sales early on, which again completely encouraged me. And so I finished 2009, and then I just started emailing galleries. Again, very lucky. I managed to get picked up by a gallery called Pappas Gallery that's no longer around, and she took a risk on me, represented me, and gave me some shows. And probably started about a 4 to 5 year representation stint and I think I did about three or four, maybe 3 shows with her. Solo exhibitions. Yep. So that just kind of became cool. Like when you do have a gallery, there's pros and cons to galleries, of course, but there's requirements. You need to produce a show, one a year, maybe one every 2 years. So having that kick up the arse was a good way to actually get the results and build up that folio. So it was good. It was good.
Because for people that aren't in that sort of art space, I guess they could probably guess, but the galleries take a fair whack in commission generally, and it does.
Yeah, about 50% is kind of commercial gallery standard.
Standard is 50.
50. Some will do 40, 40-60 split, but 50 kind of it kind of changed when I entered the scene, and 50 became the kind of standard. So yeah, it's a lot. Like I said, there's pros and cons, and I battle between those pros and cons a lot. Especially if you're having shows, the prices get boosted, and then half the sales are your friends or contacts or something. It's a bit like, come on. But, at the same time, kind of, the galleries can't decide who's... Yeah.
They have overheads as well. They've got to pay
Totally.
rent. They've got to... They don't just open the doors and there's no
100%.
overheads. So I get that, but I think what I'm going to say is I think that if you have an artist that you like, reach out to them on Instagram, DM them, and try and buy something directly from them.
Yeah,
I think that's a great way to do it. Maybe not while they've got a gallery show on, but just hit them up, because that's the best way to do it, because that money's going straight into their pocket.
Yeah.
No middleman.
Yep, totally. I mean, the fine art game's a weird one, man. Like, it's like so many artworks are just such huge prices. I mean, they kind of have to be, well, depending on how much labour goes into it, but that's not how art's valued. It's not based on labour. It's based on essentially branding, really. Like a Louis Vuitton bag is the same utility as a Kmart bag, but you've got that Louis Vuitton thing, and that's what an artist's name is. I don't mean to reduce it to such a material thing, but if you're getting a that person, that's the brand, and that's kind of what the
For sure.
the price
and it's
becomes.
like anything. People say, oh, that would be worth something. That's rare. Just because something's rare doesn't mean it's worth something. It's worth something if there is demand for it.
Right.
Whether it's rare or not.
Right.
You know?
Totally.
And that's what art is.
Yeah. The art game's a tricky one. You know, I'm currently in a fallen out of love a bit with the. I'm coming back to it. With the. You know, there's a lot of just bizarre, confusing trends which are very hard to compete with if you're trying to make it as an artist. You know, there's a lot of throwaway art, or I don't know. I could rant.
But this is a platform for you to rant. But like, there must be being a commercial artist, right? Like someone who's doing it professionally. It must be really hard to balance out what you actually want to do from the artist perspective and what you know is going to be commercially viable, especially if you're having a show.
Yeah.
What's going to actually sell? That's the aim of the show.
Totally.
You know, if you want to make art for yourself, it's probably not going to gallery show. That's your own sort of stuff. It must be hard to find that balance.
Yeah, I think that's a balance for all sorts of creatives, musicians as well. I think, you know, particularly if you get success, if you're a musician and you make an absolute banger, and then the next release or something doesn't get the plays that you want, for example, and
people overthink it.
Yeah, and we can become our own worst enemies, and it can be cool. You're chasing that hit, or you're chasing that thing that people held on to, and that's a trap. It is a hard one, particularly when, you know, that feedback is your fuel to keep making good stuff, you know. So yeah, that's a constant battle that I find. I speak to a lot of different creatives on my podcast about. I often bring that kind of thing up and how people tackle that thing, and not trying to recreate something from your heyday. How to move forward, how to break free. Yeah. You know, is the artist's role eventually to figure out something that you've done really good, tear it all up, and reinvent yourself? I think a lot of people expect that from artists, but easier said than done.
It's hard though, because when you sort of cut yourself out into a niche where yours is the landscape type thing, people expect that sort of stuff. You know what I mean? And that becomes what they expect of you. And you do a show, and all of a sudden you're doing something totally different because that's where you're going creatively. Then the gallery's like, hang on a second, man, where's the psychedelic landscapes?
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely known of artists that get dropped by galleries because they're not, or be, you know, have pressure by galleries to make a certain type of thing. I'm very lucky. None of the galleries I've worked with have ever overtly told me what to paint. They've kind of let me do my thing. But, you know, at the same time, my work hasn't deviated it that drastically into a completely different genre of art. But it's something to keep in mind for sure.
Challenging. So on this art journey, the In Too Deep podcast comes along a little bit after, but like I want to talk about it. So was that born out of you wanted to meet creative people and talk to them? Did you think it was a good marketing thing, or did you think it was just a good creative thing? Like, what was the genesis behind it in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, there was multi reasons for wanting to do it. I think one of the original reasons that I wanted to do it was, you know, we're in Australia, and it's a bit removed from the international kind of art world, or, you know, so it's just a smaller market. There's less hype. There's less. There's plenty of creatives, but there's less shows or radio shows or media that kind of celebrates up and comers. So that was probably the original thing. I'd have an exhibition. You put a year into an exhibition. It's your heart and soul. The show goes for 3 weeks, and then it's just over. And it's just like, is that it? There's a lot of deflation, I think, that comes after an art exhibition. Unfortunately, like the post exhibition blues is a legit thing that a lot of artists I know go through. So
it's like having a baby. That whole where people afterwards they're like, oh, this whole thing's happened. Now what do I do now? Yeah.
Right, totally. So I think part of it was wanting to give artists that are having shows or doing cool things a bit of a platform or an extra thing to celebrate what they're doing outside of just their exhibition or whatever. It's not just limited to art. Musician, if you're doing an album release or... So that was probably the original thing, and that's where the name came from was, a few times I've kind of worried about like, well, fuck, if the art game isn't quite working out, if I do want a bit more money, what am I going to do? And then it's this kind of understanding that, well, I'm not really skilled in anything else. I'm kind of in too deep on what I'm doing. So that was kind of the beginning of the name In Too Deep. But then that also expanded because I've got a lot of weird interests that I don't explore in my art practice, like conspiracy theories, psychedelics, just weirdos. I'm very fascinated by people. I'm very fascinated by left of center people. So, the first episode I did was with a flat earther, a friend of mine, and it was kind of that, just people who are in too deep on whatever. A lot of that was conspiracy theory kind of stuff as well, which I find it an interesting world to follow.
For sure.
Yeah.
Just on that episode 1, is that friend still a flat earther?
I'm not sure if he's still a flat earther. Yeah, he kind of goes through phases. So yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't asked him about that.
I love conspiracy theories. I love conspiracy theory docos. I love I'll watch them and I don't necessarily believe it, but I'll just watch it, like Hollow Earth, Flat Earth, all this sort of shit. I'm like, even all that QAnon stuff, I'll watch it. And I find it extremely interesting what other people believe. It doesn't mean that I believe in it. And I think you're sort of coming at it from the same angle.
100%. I mean, I had a period in my 20s where I went right down the rabbit hole and I was sold on a lot of this stuff. Illuminati, chemtrails, they're poisoning us, like all sorts of stuff. I spent 2 or 3 years very in non-ironic conspiracy land. And then I kind of snapped out of it a bit with the patience and help of my lovely wife, girlfriend at the time. She introduced a little concept called critical thinking, and putting, again, like I said before, putting your own ideas under the microscope. If you can find holes in it, it's don't ignore them. That's just as valid. And yeah, I think there was a very. It's very easy to discredit all the mainstream media, which I still think, fuck the mainstream media. They've got a lot to answer for. But when people are just putting together effectively slideshows on YouTube with very attractive information, you don't know who they are. There's no checks and balances. There's no fact checking, and it's up to you to do the fact checking. And a lot of the ideas are very attractive. They're very fun. All of a sudden, you feel like you're uncovering the secrets of the universe. And you also there's an easy trap to fall into where you actually kind of start thinking you're a bit smarter than other people because they can't see through. And that's where that term sheeple comes from. All the sheeple, they can't see and they just do what they're told. And really, what you're doing there is you're kind of creating a hierarchy between you and society and I think that's very not good. That's a toxic trap to fall into as well.
100%. Yeah, I loved conspiracy theory docos and all that sort of stuff, and I was all about it until the whole COVID sort of thing happens. And I'm like, this is getting a bit too fucking real.
It's getting very real around COVID.
And I'm like, whatever. And I don't want to talk about that too much because it's a pain in the ass. But
yeah,
I feel like a lot of people that did have these theories that were deep into it before COVID, this comes along and it validates them, and they say, man, I told you this was going to happen. No one listened to me. You knew this was going to happen. So then that does happen. So then they go, well, maybe all this other shit that I was on the fence about, that's probably true too.
Totally.
And then they're right fucking in it.
Totally. I mean, during the COVID, the lockdowns and stuff, or the freedom movement, like I kind of connected with Scobie, who was on your podcast a while ago. He was kind of jumping in. I went to a few of the freedom marches too, just to ask a few questions, see what's going on, and
you'll never. It
was interesting.
Yeah, man. I don't think we'll ever find a time where you'd get sort of far right and far left people kind of with the same mentality. I don't like that was just an odd time like that.
Yeah.
You had people that were total anti-vaxxers. You should never vaccinate anybody and just be free. And then other people like, fuck the go. Like, it was just a fucking weird time, man.
It was a really weird time. And it also, kind of post-COVID, it also reminded me of how being a conspiracy theorist, feeling like you got duped, going completely the opposite way where it's all bullshit. Debunking it is kind of, I feel like debunking can also get you in a bit of a trap where you stop being open-minded. Sometimes, again, being too open-minded when everything's true is not always the smartest way, but you can close your eyes to a few things. Like, I mean, for instance, like I got vaccinated before the mandates came in because I was like, let's get on board. Let's get this shit happening. But like there's artists like Scotty Marsh who he got a proper heart issue, which he's been public about. He's made his podcast about, and so that contradicted my thinking. So I got him on the podcast and we talked about it. And I think something about when you do talk with people who are actually affected by things like having a vaccine, and he was on board. He did a big mural saying, I think with Bob Hawke or something, saying like, get vaccinated and get back to the pub. And when you do speak to someone who's been affected, I think it's another reminder for me to shut the fuck up and realize I don't know everything. It's like, what are we doing with this team playing stuff? I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I want to, all I'm saying is you have to be, I think you do have to be open-minded to the other side, even when
But that's because you're a well-rounded, intelligent individual. See, the
Try to
problem
be.
was,
I'm also,
I'm
a moron. But hey.
During that time, obviously no one could do anything. The internet was so there, and when you just go down your echo chamber of social media, and you'll hear what you want to hear, or you'll hear the exact opposite, and then you'll fight with them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what happens like with social media, and that's what the only outlet that a lot of people did. They had YouTube rabbit holes they could go down, and then they had social media fucking soapboxes they could stand on.
Totally. I mean, like I said before, the media has so much to answer for, and I think Facebook was a good example of that. So I think there were these kind of tests and things that they did with, I think, YouTube and Facebook, where the algorithms come into play and you watch a video, and if you just start clicking the recommended next video, I think it was, I'll butcher it, but it was something like after 9 videos, you've been led to a QAnon content or something. Yeah. So you've got these platforms like YouTube, or for example, where they were effectively pushing QAnon content. Then it got to a point where like QAnon's got out of hand and they banned everyone forever talking about QAnon. It's like, no, you guys did that.
You created this monster.
And now you're punishing everyone for doing the thing that your algorithm told them to do. So yeah, it's like YouTube's pretty cooked with its censorship. Like I've had countless videos pulled down, nearly got kicked off YouTube for merely talking about issues that were dominating our lives, like COVID. I think the episode I did with Scobie from What's Doing Media, that got pulled. Right. We were both talking about how silly, the anti-vax movement was, and how we were both on board. And at the time, that's where our opinions were.
I think they're just triggering words.
100%.
That's all it would have been. They wouldn't have even looked at what angle you just said.
100%. That's what's going on. But like, do better.
Yeah.
Like, do better, because there's a lot of people just getting... I don't make any money from my podcast at all, but there's a lot of people that make money from their YouTubes and accounts and their new media. And if you're going to yank the rug from under their feet, I think it should probably have a little bit more fairness to that decision.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just... Yeah, the media's pretty woeful.
For sure. But yeah, and that's the beauty about the internet. It gives dickheads like you and me a platform to talk and to ask questions and that sort of thing. So slowly the media landscape is changing with social media, with Web 2, I think this is Web 3, I don't know what Web 1 to, but where you can interact,
Mm-hmm.
So it is slowly changing.
Definitely. I mean, it's so fun doing a podcast, right?
For sure.
It's wonderful.
So and we're not going to put a positive spin on COVID at all, but from someone who had already started when all the lockdowns and everything happened, you already had your platform.
Right, yeah, I started 2019. So, yeah, it kind of I can't remember how many episodes I
You were early,
did.
but you were still in it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was before COVID kicked off. So doing it during COVID was actually a very good way to keep me sane.
Yeah.
Keeping,
And there's an audience there because people can't do much.
Right. Yeah, there was. Absolutely. But also, I think a lot of people went a long time without talking to people. And I think a lot of people, I mean, me included, it was difficult to kind of emerge. We were the most locked down city in the world. And I feel like that whole lockdown period, I was very extroverted. I still am to an extent, but my desire to be out and about drastically changed from that long lockdown period. But yeah, the podcast was a great way to keep my social skills sharpened because I was talking to new people, strangers every week. Yeah, very grateful that I had that to keep it fun.
Did that change the direction of it once you had the lockdowns happening? Because obviously you started with the conspiracy thing, but also a lot of artists.
Lots of artists.
Did that change the way that you were going? You thought, I can go more international now?
Yeah, 100%. I think when I started, I very much wanted it to be all in person, but then when lockdown happened, I kind of started realizing, well, that's not really going to happen unless you break the rules. Definitely did break the rules a few times, but once I started being like, cool, well, Zoom exists, let's reach out to some international guests. That changed everything. All of a sudden, I realized...
Just email, DMs and Instagram?
All sorts. Yeah. I mean, I got on Twitter just for that purpose. So there'd be Twitter, there'd be Instagram DMs, there'd be emails, there'll be Facebook. Certain subjects like Twitter was very good for the political / QAnon stuff. Everyone's on Twitter sharing that stuff. Obviously, artists on Instagram, UFO content, all the old UFO heads are on Facebook. They don't do the new stuff. So, there's just like figuring out what social media or what access point is best suited for the subject that I wanted to kind of tackle. But I mean, we're in a very amazing time where people are reachable. Yeah. People are reachable. Back in the day, that was not the case.
No. And you can bypass people's agents or PAs or whatever. You can just email them directly a lot of the time.
100%. Yeah. Agents, I've had to deal with a few agents. Yeah, a lot of the time they're okay, but a lot of the time they're annoying. They're just...
The thing is, I think in this day and age, anyone who has a product to sell, whether it's a personal brand or whatever they are, anyone you're talking to, whether they're an artist, whether they've got an agenda because they're into a certain conspiracy, they enjoy any kind of platform you can give them,
Yeah.
So they're generally going to be pretty down to talk unless they're somebody who's wanted to step away from the limelight.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. I mean, and again, media changes. It's not... I don't have an antenna. I don't watch TV at all. It's just all internet. I think a lot of people are like that these days. Sure. And then it changes again. Then it's all YouTube and podcasts. Then it's all TikTok. And these old ways of... I mean, I'm stating the obvious but the old media is a thing of the past. It's not totally dead, but it's very much not the forefront of media anymore, like TV or interviews on the Tonight Show, for example.
But it's funny, you see with my small platform, most of it is consumed on TV. Like the Instagram thing, the YouTube analytics tells you that most people watch it on a TV. So people are watching TV, but they're not watching traditional TV.
Right. Yeah.
It depends on the content. But
totally.
Yeah,
I was talking more like the channel, Channel 7, Channel 10.
They're done, but I think that people are still going to sit there and stare at a screen on a wall for a while. It's still a thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's still a thing, Like
we're plagued.
Yeah, but it's still a thing.
Plagued by screens.
People say, I don't really watch TV, but they watch Netflix. They still watch the football. They still watch you know what I mean? They'll still watch YouTube content, long form on there. So TV still exists, just in a different way.
For sure. Yeah, just in a sidestep. Yeah, it's just sidestepped.
Yeah.
I mean, it is interesting how, I think probably when Joe Rogan started, turns out people will sit and watch, not just listen to, but watch a 3.5 hour podcast of just two people sitting. And I don't think anyone really expected that to be the case when we're getting shorter and shorter attention spans. So it's interesting, I guess.
It is. That did come sort of out of left field, but I think that as you get older and when, generations before us, you had talkback radio, people got to a certain age,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
they
yeah,
wanted
yeah.
to listen to people talk about the issues.
Yeah.
Now, that's kind of gone because radio's just fizzling out. But then we kind of copped this whole 90s and 2000s where radio became so shit. So I think there was a thirst for people actually having conversations, and it just took the internet to really hit its straps for streaming and buffering to get there before that could actually happen.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
That's my theory.
100%. And I think that's also with the kind of conspiracy theory angle of my podcast. Like, I think a lot of people have a curiosity with a subject like QAnon or flat Earth or I don't know, lizard people, but no one really wants to be stuck at the party getting barked at for 2 hours by the person that believes it. So I actually kind of enjoy those conversations within limits, of course, but it's about context. So I think being a fly on the wall for those conversations as a listener is much easier to endure.
But there must be times when you're talking to these people and you've obviously reached out to them because they've got some pretty way out there theories, and you're talking to them and you're like, I'm trying to keep a straight face. This person is a fair wacko.
100%. I've got the full gamut. 100%. But,
that's part of it.
I'm interested how they got to that conclusion, Like, I'm interested in how our normal media landscape has failed people, how so many of what we're fed fails people, to the fact that you're like, well, this is all bullshit, or how people get disenfranchised to then start believing wacky stuff. I mean, I'm not a religious person. I've got my own spiritual beliefs for sure, but the story of the Christian story is pretty out there. The Hindu stories with all the gods and blue people, it's pretty out there. I mean, I find them very interesting, but, it's easy to bash on to a Scientologist about their crazy story of evil Lord Xenu capturing souls and dumping those souls into a volcano. But then if you look at some of the religious stories that we grow up with, they're just thousands of years old, so we accept them. We all have our own contradictions. It's easy to point the finger, and I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting how people get to these conclusions.
It definitely is. So you cover a lot of different stuff, but then you kind of keep coming back to the artist thing. So I feel like the interesting and, let's say, out there people are a mainstay, but then you always seem to be like, let's go back to this artist. So, and you want to give a platform for people that your art you enjoy, I'm guessing. That's sort of
100%.
The other way, yeah.
Yeah. It's also a great excuse just to meet my heroes, It's also a great excuse to learn from people of a far higher caliber or far further down the career path than me. I don't know about you, but, I grew up listening to Joe Rogan from years back,
I didn't get onto him. I was very late to that whole thing.
Yeah.
I'm not into MMA.
No, I'm not into MMA either. I pick the episodes, but, early days when I got my studio and early days of podcasting, I was listening to that a lot. And, I've had a lot of people saying, like, if you just focus on the conspiracy theories, your podcast will grow, or if you just focus on that. And there's a lot of art podcasts or more specifically tailored podcasts that do a lot better than mine. But I think it's just like, I'm my own boss. I don't give a fuck. Let's just follow the interest and go there. So, yeah, it's a bit all over. The podcast is a bit all over the place, but it started as like an aid for artists. What would you want to listen to while we're all in our studios painting? There's a lot of alone time. I think I want to listen to very good artists explore ideas, and I also want to hear some weird shit. So that's kind of the bones of the podcast. Yeah.
Do you think about it balancing? Do you be like, all right, I've just done 4 episodes of artists. I've got to find someone out there now.
I probably, to be honest, enjoy the weird ones more. They're harder to source. They're harder to find.
To vet them, I'd imagine. Like
there's no vetting. There's no vetting. I will happily platform All platform. I don't give a fuck about that media responsibility.
Yeah.
Boring. Yeah, so like maybe like two to three artists or creatives, and then something strange. Or something, it's not always strange. It's not just like how weird can we get. It's, sometimes it'll be someone who's endured something very difficult, or someone who's, an inspiring story, just something that outside of art or the creative field, just something that's gets me thinking, gets me inspired, gets me like scratching my head. Yeah.
Even with the out there people, is there still times where you'll be like, okay, I'm expecting this, and they just take it in some other direction? You're like, I didn't know that this person was going that deep in a different way.
Yeah, for sure. There's been podcasts that I was not quite prepared for at all, which direction it would go. But I really like the tangents. I embrace the tangents. I think planning an episode, for me personally, I'll do a plan, but I have to be prepared to abandon that plan mid conversation, because
I've got notes here. I haven't even looked at them.
Right, totally. And I'll always plan. I have notes, and I very often won't actually look at them, because you can get on something very good, and then you can kind of bring it back to the designated questions. And I think sometimes you can cut yourself short a bit of getting to the gold,
Yeah. I think that with a lot of shows where people do over prepare, you might be taking us on some sort of journey, and I say, and what was your second art show like? And then you let people, you know what I mean? Like, because that's the next thing on my fucking notes, and it just derails the whole interesting organic conversation.
It is good for me, it is good to have the notes as well, because totally. Sometimes you'll get to the end of a really awesome rant, and then you're just like, I don't know where to go. So just having something to keep it kind of flowing is good for me, at least.
And I guess for each different host of a podcast, it depends on what kind of chats and show you want to have, because sometimes people be like, oh, you didn't even talk to such and such about this thing that they did. I'm like, well, it just didn't go there. I'm not going to bring that up just for the sake of talking about their best album or fucking whatever,
Yeah, totally. And sometimes people don't have the time that you want out of them either. So, sometimes I learned that early on when I didn't ask someone how long they had. I think it was John McAfee, and then I think, of all people, I didn't ask at the start. It was very early on. I have no idea how the hell I got him. And then I don't think he particularly liked me or my line of questioning, which is totally fine. And then he's just like abruptly like, cool, you got one more question. Like, basically, he's like, I'm over this. You got one question. So,
but that, and when I did have notes, he's probably going to be your most high profile guest, right? So, how did that even happen, man?
A friend from school, I wasn't on Twitter, and a friend from school was obviously following him on Twitter, and he did a tweet saying, I'm over, like, screw mainstream media. They're all just like vultures. I'm not going to do any interviews other than podcast interviews now.
Here's your chance.
Yeah, so he just screenshotted that and sent it to me, and I think there was an email on there. Not his email, like his partner's email or something. So I just got in there, and they had like a prerequisite, like you have to have done at least 30 episodes or something. And I was like, oh my God, I'm like 29, cool. So like, let's smash out another one, and just kind of scraped in on the prerequisites that he decided. And
did they ask about your audience, how big your platform was, any of that stuff?
No, they didn't. People have, and people have said no to my podcast because my audience isn't big enough, and it's just something you got to wear. Definitely have considered lying about it, but I don't know. I tend not to. It's good not to lie, because it can just screw you over. Sometimes people. There was one UFO guy that Dr. Stephen Greer. He's like, he would only do it if you had an audience of 100,000 listeners or something. I'm like, I don't have that.
Yeah.
So you can't have there's a lot of no's. There's a lot of, I don't know if you get that, but no one knows how many no's I've had. They're like, wow, your list is very good of guests, and there's a lot of no's. A lot.
Yeah. Mine's totally different because it's all in person, and it's mostly based around, like, I'm going to be expanding out of Melbourne, but it's mostly based around here. So the no's don't happen as much, and they're not saying no because they want a bigger platform. They're more saying no because they don't want to be on camera.
Yep.
They don't enjoy the and they just don't feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And I always reply to that, yeah, it's cool. It's not for everybody. Like, that's
Not for
fine.
everyone. Yeah.
It's not for everybody. You get a lot of people that want to be on the show and you're like, I don't know if they're interesting enough. And that's a different fucking thing to navigate as well, you know?
For sure. Particularly with studio artists, you know. Street artists are out and about. A lot of studio artists are in their studio vast majority of the time. So, you know, a lot of them are not always that comfortable being on record, or particularly these days, a lot of people are very scared for saying the wrong thing or sounding stupid.
For sure.
Because, you know, cancel culture, basically, you know. I mean, you don't really have to worry about it with a platform my size.
No.
But
and this is 100% why I keep my actual business out of this, because someone could say something stupid and then it affects how you make money, and that's cooked.
Totally. Lucky I make no money, so that's the benefits of being poor.
But that's the thing, you've got to be careful about. Like, you could even be in trouble for someone else saying something on your platform. They just automatically point back to you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that, but believe me, I've covered some pretty shaky ground. I've interviewed a cannibal. I've interviewed 2 pedophiles. I've interviewed fucking crazy people.
Yeah. The pedophile people, was there backlash from your audience for that?
Nah.
No.
No, I mean the second one. So one, it's such a gross topic. You know, like that. I mean, I can't. The first one I can't even listen to.
I couldn't
second
listen to
time.
Yeah.
But I mean, one was like a non-offender, so he had the affliction, but had never, if you trust his word. So the reasoning behind doing that was like, well, is this a solvable thing before it gets to the point where horrific thing. The second one was I was actually trying to pin the guy because this crazy motherfucker called Josiah was basically having, I think, a schizophrenic break, but at the same time trying to start a cult and trying to justify pedophilia to his audience. Sorry if this is gross subject for your podcast, but anyway, we basically the intention was to get him on camera admitting that he does that, which I did, and then maybe a month later, he was arrested and got sent to a mental health facility, as far as I know. And
so you feel like you've done a community service?
Look, someone else did the sting. That was all on them. But I think at least kind of helped raise a bit of the alarm bells to like, hey, this is a dangerous person. It also shined a huge light on YouTube's weird, like, we were trying to get him off YouTube and he started making all this content aimed at children. It was like, so this whole team kind of formed of these internet sleuths that started reaching out to me. It was actually a fascinating experience, dealing with all these other streamers or investigators, and just a weird world of other online people trying nobly to take down some bad people. Yeah. It's bizarre.
It is a whole kind of world. Like I see little snippets on Instagram and stuff where people devote their whole life to trying to catch out these other people. You're like, good on you for trying to do the right thing, but it's becoming reasonably obsessive. Like,
yeah, I know, it's weird.
It's kind of strange.
It's strange, and it's like that is definitely the moment where the podcast has gotten me in the most in too deep. Like, it took up a lot of mental space, a lot of a lot of energy in a mental space in that little rabbit hole. And I think ultimately it did a bit of good. It definitely weirded a lot of people. I got people who listen to my podcasts who are in like the fine art world who are doing quite well and stuff, and then you throw an episode like that at people and they're like, I got a lot of DMs like, what the fuck did I just listen to, dude? But hey, that's what we do.
Like, obviously with people that have mental issues, which a lot of these, I'm not going to say all the conspiracy people do, but a lot of people might have some mental issues there. So you've also got to walk the fine line of talking to these people without taking the piss out of them as well, because they might
100%.
have issues. You know?
Yeah. And that's like, I'm never there to like, apart from that guy that I just mentioned, there was an intention behind there where I got a little spicy, but I'm not there. Like, I'm kind of interested in a lot of the people, particularly some people who may have, mental issues or just mental health issues or something. There have been people that say, well, what are you platforming for? And it's like, well, they've built their own platforms anyway. I saw a big problem with the, I don't know, maybe like around COVID or a lot of progressive kind of media stuff where people wanting to shut down conversation, and I don't think we get any closer to understanding what's going on when we do shut down conversation. So, I mean, I always approach with an open mind, an open heart, as cheesy as that sounds. I try to give all of my guests as wacky or whatever with a good fair. I treat them, properly and equally, and I am genuinely interested in this strange whatever it is. So, yeah, I don't know.
You don't want to take advantage of people, but you want them to tell their story, but you don't
Right.
want to take the piss out of them, but then you want them to say their craziest beliefs because that's going to be the most interesting stuff. So it is a sort of, it's a fine line.
It's a fine line. Yeah. It's a fine line for sure. But conspiracy theories, for example, it's became a very fast-growing phenomenon. It's been around forever, but particularly around lockdowns and stuff, it really, and I think in the Trump era and stuff, things really started to become more mainstream in terms of conspiracy theories. And I think to be honest, I think there's a big part of that where a lot of these crazy ideas are being led by maybe, not always, I hope I'm not being unfair here, but, sometimes some less stable individuals or some very polarized individuals or some very paranoid individuals. And I think it just goes with the territory. I think if you want to address the subject, I think you're going to come across it. And I don't think you should ban people for being paranoid. Like, that's kind of a bit selective in itself as well. So, yeah, it is a fine line, but that's why I just try to approach every conversation with respect.
With the whole QAnon thing, like I saw a couple of docos about the people that they were saying started the whole thing with the 4chan and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And that's
I had some of them on, yeah. Jim Watkins, he was on.
That's it. So that's kind of become,
Brennan.
we know that it was basically them, yeah? So does the whole thing just get thrown out the window, but the people still believe it? It's like...
It very much looks like it was them, but we don't actually know if it was them, and I don't know whether we will. Like, so the QAnon doco that came out as an HBO 6-parter,
Weathering the Storm or something.
Into the Storm.
Into
I
the
think
Storm,
that was a really good. I've watched
great.
that quite a number of times. It was really well done. The guy who made that did an excellent job. But at the end there was this kind of admission by Ron Watkins that he kind of said something, but I'm not 100% convinced that was total proof. I don't know exactly what
people
went down.
pushing Trump agenda.
I reckon they were definitely involved. Yeah. I reckon they definitely knew. The Watkins definitely knew, and maybe collaborators, maybe total instigators. And that's where I kind of deviate from a lot of the QAnon researchers. And also, I'm not the most thorough researcher too. There's a lot of QAnon researchers that have done a lot more work and analysis than I have.
Does it still exist? Is it still a thing?
Yeah, I mean, more or less. It fizzled, but then it's like, yeah. I mean, QAnon was really a rebranding of classic conspiracies. It used to be things like the New World Order, and then it became the Democratic Cabal, for example. And I guess the big difference between a lot of the more classical conspiracy threads was the fact that Trump is involved. He's there to save the world and uncover the pedophile cultist elites and blah, blah, blah. There was this big element of it switched to the Democrats were in America were the evil elites, and the kind of it became more political, I guess, far more political QAnon.
Some people within that QAnon space think that Trump is actually a prince of somebody and he was born into a family that... And I'm like, it gets crazy.
Yeah, it gets crazy in every direction. And there's like... That's why it's so appealing, like all those videos that I used to watch in my early 20s of like the Bush's bloodline and this and that, and so-and-so's related to some royals, and these people have always been in charge, and like, I don't know. I mean... I don't know. Again, I'm not that thorough, and I don't care enough to. I'm curious, but I'm not obsessed. So I don't know. There's always a sprinkle of truth with most of these conspiracies, and they just take it that bit extra into the real wacky kind of ideas where I think a lot of rational people tap out.
Yeah. With the dude, I don't know what his real name is, but the QAnon shaman guy that you've had on a couple of times.
Jacob Angeli Chansley.
There you go. That's a huge get. Obviously, he was the face of that movement for a while, sort of thing, just because of the photos that he was in.
Yeah.
Was that like when he agreed to do it, were you like, fuck, man, this is something here?
Yeah, I mean, I tried to get him for a while. And
he was locked up for a while, wasn't he?
He was locked up for a while, and when he came out, I made contact a few times, and he said yes, and ghosted, and blah, 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 blah. And it probably took, I don't know, 6 to 9 months, maybe even a year before I actually got him.
Persistency.
Yeah, or just strategically tap back in when maybe enough time's gone by, or I've maybe emailed from a different email address or something. No lying. I don't say I'm someone else, but I just, if you've already got a thread that is ignored, if a new email address comes up, it's just a fresh invite. Things like that have been, useful. Again, I never say I'm anyone else. I'm like, hi, my name's Jack, blah, 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 from Australia.
I've never emailed anyone to ask them. I do everything through Instagram, which is pretty bad. But
a lot just through Instagram. Yeah. But he's an interesting guy. I actually thought he was a pretty nice guy, to be honest. He's got some pretty out there beliefs. But I was actually kind of, I was in the first interview particularly. I was surprised with, there was a lot that I did actually agree with him, and that's challenging as well when you've categorized someone in your head. I think which a lot of us did, categorize someone as like really, really kooky and on the far edge of what's normal. And look, he's really into shamanism. I'm fascinated by shamanism. I've been done some ayahuasca retreats, and I've done a lot of exploration with psychedelics, and there's a shamanic element. I don't know heaps about it, but that's interesting. There's a lot of different spiritual kind of beliefs that he goes on about. There's a lot of very anti-media stuff and anti-elite stuff, which I also agree with. I think there's a lot of injustices that have been fed by greedy people. But, then he goes as far to say Hillary Clinton, for example, is like harvesting child's blood.
So his time in prison didn't change his beliefs, it amplified it?
I think they just stayed consistent, I think he's made up his mind on what makes sense to him. And I think it is I had even my parents listen to that episode, and they said, it's actually really interesting to hear a conversation with someone like that, because I just thought he's a crazy person. Yeah. And that's exactly how the media portrayed him. And look, if you did think that, maybe you'd probably be forgiven because he's pretty, on into some more fringe ideas, and he dresses up. He puts on a show. He yells in a megaphone, and he's So you'd be forgiven for thinking that, but
was he different the second time round? Because you've done it twice, yeah.
Second time got a little more spicy.
Okay.
I mean, I personally think he doesn't apply the same standards to someone like a Donald Trump that he would to the Clintons, for example. And my personal opinion is, Trump's a egomaniacal piece of shit who's a con man who's, gamed, built a kind of a bit of a cult around him. That's my personal opinion.
This is the thing, though, I always think, did he build the cult or did people build it around him because they knew?
Yeah, good question.
This is the thing. Now the Democrats are like, people will vote for them because it's not Trump. Now, when he came along...
Which is dangerous in itself.
Yeah. But when he came along, people sort of voted for him because he wasn't a politician.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and he was a wrecking ball.
Yeah.
And he was calling out politicians. I get it, He railroaded Jeb Bush and he railroaded Hillary Clinton, and he wasn't doing the virtue signaling, polished stuff that all the other politicians do. And although I think he's a very dishonest human, he lies very frequently, there is a kind of honesty to not giving a fuck and just calling out politicians. I think has been much needed in the political and media landscape. But, the way I see it is like, don't let a lion into the den to deal with a rat problem, for example.
for some people like us, right, that live on the other side of the world, and obviously it impacts us to some extent, he's fucking entertaining.
Oh, I don't know shit about Australian politics.
But it's entertaining.
It's a show. He's put on a show, right?
Yeah, you would always see, when he was in power, you would always see snippets of him doing something, saying stupid shit, putting his foot in his mouth, calling someone a dickhead, then Biden's in, and then it's like, nothing much happens.
Yeah.
I'm like, at least Trump was entertaining.
Yeah, totally. And I think that speaks to a lot of, like, what do you call it, like the cult of personality around a lot of, American politics. And I think it's coming to Australia too. A lot of, politicians are putting on shows. Remember Pauline Hanson put on the burqa in Parliament, and, Clive Palmer just completely copied the Donald Trump slogan. I think it just... Billboard saying "Make Australia Great Again."
Like, those big yellow ones everywhere. Yeah,
just get a little bit more original, would you? Look, I'm not actually that deep into politics, but I do find, I think my interest more speaks to that. Like, I'm very interested in like cults, for example. Like, where are our vulnerabilities? How do we get manipulated? How do people come to the conclusions? And I'm very fascinated how people came to the conclusion that Donald Trump is sent from God and he's going to save us all.
Some people believe that.
A lot of people do.
Yeah. I think one thing that I've noticed doing my podcast, and I'm talking to more creative people and not necessarily fringe people as much as you are, but I find with a lot of creative people, there seems to be a common thread that there is sort of some trauma there in their life, and that's kind of what pushes them. Are you finding that a lot as well?
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, trauma makes up a lot of interesting people and interesting conclusions. Also, a lot of interesting artists make a lot of interesting art based on. It's not a subject that I particularly shy away from on the podcast. It's there's been some pretty sad stories that have come out on the podcast, and it's And
I think what we want to learn, and what I'm trying to push when I speak to a lot of these people about that stuff, is that most issues in grown adult life comes from trauma that you've had when you were in your teen years or your childhood or wherever. And that trauma then manifests into mental stress, which then manifests into substance abuse or some sort of addiction generally. That's the conclusion I've come to.
Yeah.
And if you learn to deal with that trauma, you're less likely to fuck your life up with substances.
Totally. It can also lead to great strength. It can also lead to really, incredible stories of people overcoming. And, I think some of the strongest people I know have endured some pretty horrific traumas, far more than I could ever comprehend going through. And, it's, it affects us all very differently.
But talking about it is the key to a lot of it.
I think so. I think
because that's how you deal with it,
right? I think we've had lots of generations where particularly like all of our grandparents went through World War II, for example, and there's a lot of don't talk about the war kind of stuff, and for example. And I think, as the generations have gone on, I think we've become more equipped. Psychology has kind of developed. I think we've become a bit more equipped to be open, less stigma around being open, less stigma around men having to have a stiff upper lip, because I think often when men push that shit down, we'll see all sorts of horrific things like domestic abuse or substance abuse or, also, so I think the talking about shining light on dark corners, I'm not I don't shy away from it. Yeah,
I think there is, and there's also again a fine line. Like, you want people to understand the trauma, but then you don't want to use that as a crutch and say, "Well, I'm like this because this is the way I've been through that trauma."
Yeah. It can definitely. There's traps in every direction. It can be an excuse for not rising above, for sure. I found like people like I've been sorry, not talking into the mic. I've found I've been very interested throughout the years of like self-help kind of stuff. I got very into Tony Robbins when I was probably around like 17 or something.
Those infomercials are on late at night.
He's good, man. He got me, like I was getting in a lot of trouble in my like late teens and being a little delinquent, and my parents sent me to Tony Robbins, and there was a big transformation there.
Did you walk on hot coals?
Walked on hot coals.
Did you really?
Yeah. Did the walking on hot coals.
I just thought that was a stereotypical thing.
Nah,
It's a real thing.
Totally did it. I'd never felt more in control of my life. I mean, I was young. I was like still late teenager, but part of that big seminar that went for about 4 days was some really hard truths and hard conversations that he is incredibly skilled at delivering. We're talking about our trauma stories can define us, and they really don't define you. They're things that have happened to you, and they can very easily become excuses for you not to excel. And overcoming that and putting it in the place that it, not ignoring it, dealing with it totally, but not identifying it so firmly that is who you are. And it's just something, yeah. So
you found it extremely helpful.
He was. And, as I've progressed, there have been other incredible influences that have been masterful deliverers of incredible truths that I think is beneficial for all of us to know. So
you don't think, because he comes across, and I've never been to the seminars, I've just seen infomercials.
They're not cheap.
Well, exactly. So he's a great salesman. He's a very good motivational speaker. But you think he's not a grifter, like its message
I
is
don't.
right?
I think he's helped far more people personally. I know there's criticisms of everyone.
It's a bit cultish as well.
It is a bit cultish. There's for sure. But part of that big cultish, go in there, there's big music, real cheesy, everyone's kind of dancing, everyone's drunk the Kool-Aid, but he's trying to shake up the system, get a lot of energy into people, and I could definitely be prime cult material. Like,
but that's like, you obviously, I'm guessing, my favourite kind of doggos are cult ones, and I'm guessing you're probably right up there with that,
sure.
and conspiracy ones. Every time I watch a cult doco, which I love watching them, I always go, that person actually seems like they're too intelligent for that. And they also often say, I never thought I'd be one that got sucked into a cult, but there I was.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, most people in cults are, I think, universally known not to be stupid. I think there's a deep yearning for most of humanity to find purpose.
Acceptance
of them.
They find
self-love.
vulnerable people a lot, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And there's this other my guy, my spiritual North Star, which is a man called Ram Dass. He was big in the psychedelic 60s with Timothy Leary. He's kind of Timothy Leary's right-hand man. He was a professor of psychology, got kicked out, and then he went to India basically with all this acid, trying to find answers through gurus. Like, what is this stuff that's making me feel so clear? And then he found his guru, and he became a big... a big figure bringing a lot of Eastern ideas to the West in the kind of like 60s, 70s, kind of maybe more 70s. Anyway, like I probably like 7 years ago or something now found out he was still around, and they had retreats in Hawaii, and I went twice to the Ram Dass retreats in Hawaii. Incredible experience. I felt never felt better. Probably the happiest I've ever felt around those couple of years. But also part of me was like, this is like totally a cult. I mean, it is, but it isn't. I mean, like, what is the definition of a cult? We had all these people from mostly America, but all over the world, and there was the guru-like figure. I mean, he's never claimed to be a guru, but he's a teacher. But there's a lot of incredible spiritual teachers, and
So what is the definition of a cult, though? Do you know what I mean? Because, like, sport is a cult. You know what I mean? Like, people are literally brainwashed to hate someone who wears a different uniform because they go to that one and they believe that. So there is different versions. It's like a bit of a spectrum of what actually is, what defines a cult. People get that mentality for a lot of things.
For sure. For sure.
Politics 100%.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You know, I think things like even like Flat Earth were considered cults at some time. Yeah, it does have a bit of a loosey-goosey, flexible definition. Kind of gets thrown around a lot these days. But
is it because now with the internet, it's people trying to find their tribe and they do in not necessarily a geographical way, they just find them online. We're part of the same sort of tribe.
Yeah.
We all have the same beliefs, you know?
yeah, definitely. I mean, these days you can find your echo chamber very, very easily. I think the responsibility of the individual is to take the good bits and, you know, discern what's useful, what's not useful. Try and be critical. Try and keep your, you know, don't have blinders. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, which I definitely have in the past.
Yeah.
And it's all a learning curve.
Have you had many cult participants on the podcast? A lot of people don't want to talk about it because they feel like they're...
Yeah, they feel duped.
Yeah.
I've tried to get a bunch on. They're sometimes harder to get. None that actually properly come to mind. Oh, hold on. Yeah, look, there was... Again, it depends what the definition of cult is, but I did a few episodes with this. There was a QAnon offshoot group, and they had a cult-like figure of this, it's kind of known as Negative 48.
I listened to this one yesterday.
Oh, really?
Yeah. With the Australian woman.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So there's this Australian woman who I connected with on Twitter, and she goes by Karma. And she really kind of, I think she lost one of her really good friends, well, lost to the rabbit hole, a really good friend to QAnon-like, beliefs. Anyway, she directed a lot of her research into this group known as kind of like, I guess, Negative 48. And effectively it was a offshoot, it was the more wacky branch of QAnon. They've appeared in mainstream media a few times, but they play around with this thing called gematria, which is this... assigning numerical value to words and letters. I think its origins are in like the Jewish religion and Hebrew. I think there's I can't exactly know how to say it.
They're trying to find meaning in stuff that's not there. Sort of.
Absolutely. They're drawing dots where there are no dots in every sentence of everything. And they would go on these Telegram live streams and just stream for like 6 hours. And I'd sometimes listen to them while I'd paint and just... They were the ones that really thought that JFK, not JFK Jr., or they thought JFK is still alive. He is actually the president. They would think that Trump...
How old would he be now?
Like 100, I can't remember, like 103 or something. And then they thought JFK Jr. was also involved, and they thought, like, they would think that Joe Biden is actually Jim Carrey in a mask.
I've
they
heard
would
that
think,
one, yeah.
This is all, life is a movie, we're all in a movie. And they're all actors putting on a show, and big obsession around JFK. Again, JFK.
Why JFK?
I don't know, man.
Why'd they?
I really don't know. I've tried to get to the bottom of that many times, and I don't know why JFK. And yeah, they think Trump and JFK are in cahoots, and sometimes they think Trump's in a mask, and sometimes it's not Trump, and sometimes they say, well, Joe Biden wasn't actually president, it's Trump. And the logic just trips over itself in the most obvious ways. But still, they run with it. Anyway, the leader of that, he called himself Negative 48, which apparently 48 means equals bad, or evil. So Negative 48 is the opposite of evil. That's the meaning of the name Negative 48. And I can't remember his name. I think it was Brian Protzman, who actually died about a year or so ago, maybe a bit more, in a motorcycle accident, which kind of made the group less centralized, I guess. But yeah, I had one of the guys on who was a follower of that, and he was pretty turbo. He was very turbo. I got about 4 words in on that entire podcast.
They just want to run with the platform, yeah.
Yeah. Look, it's even if I, lose control of a conversation, it's still insightful to the way that the people are thinking.
I know obviously you don't strike me as the kind of guy who worries too much about the numbers, but do you see them fluctuate much between someone who's right out there and then someone who's just not so much out there as far as like just like an artist or something like that?
Yeah, for sure.
You do?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, some episodes will, and again, it depends on what platform those people have got, and sometimes just a random episode without the guest having a big platform is just so niche that it gets a lot of traction. But yeah, I've definitely gone through waves of really trying to get the numbers up, and then I found I just kind of got a bit too, kind of killed the fun. So I'm pretty bad at the marketing of my podcast and everything, but I don't really care. I just kind of want to make it as interesting. I feel like if I'm very engaged and interested, not chasing the things, then I feel that the audience will be too. So
yeah, man, and I think that's totally the case. I've tried to make content that I would enjoy watching or consuming, and if I enjoy it, hopefully there's a market out there.
Yeah,
but one thing, and you're into this thing a lot deeper than I am with 185 episodes. I think we've all realised there's never going to be much money in it at all.
I gave up on that. Yeah,
people think. I speak to some people, and they think they're going to make money after they've done 50 episodes or something. And then that's why all these people start doing it, and then they drop off because they're like, oh, hang on, I spent so much time and effort in this, and I'm not making any money. You're like, where was your bit? Where did you think that was going to come from? Yeah. So once you realise there's no money, we just do it for the love. Then that's the best mindset.
Yeah, and that's been a bit of a journey as well. But, luckily, being an artist, we're used to not making a whole lot of money for the passion projects that we do. But, at the same time, it's like I am blown away by the people I've been lucky enough to talk to. I'm just so grateful for some of the incredible thinkers and strange people and artists at the top of the game that have made the time for me. I've benefited so much from having these conversations. It's shaped my career. It's shaped my trajectory in life many times.
Made you a more well-rounded person.
100%. It's and it's all it's also opened some doors in terms of like collaborating with new creatives that I wouldn't have had access to. So yeah, there's some things that are far more beneficial than money
for sure
that I've found that have come from this project.
Have you had any guests that you went in with sort of a preconceived idea and they've managed to sort of switch you and you convince you or change your opinion?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, a number. I mean, a number of them. Scotty Marsh was one of them. Yep. Just softening to my ideas about things around COVID.
Slowly, those guys are getting the validation that they probably deserve. People coming around.
I'm still not like flipped. Like I just think there's more room for a nuanced conversation. This one researcher lady called BX, she used to go by BX Bullet. I've had her on a couple of times. She's awesome. She's like she's American, and she was instrumental in bringing down that pedophile cultist guy that I was talking about before. Mm-hmm. But she does some really deep dives, and I've seen her research behind the scenes outside of the podcast, and have had a lot of communications. And she kind of she reframed how I see certain manipulative, dark characters, pulling some strings and swaying things, like these accelerationists and these very dark satanic cultists, which I thought was like, oh yeah, lol. But they exist. Maybe not to the extent that like the hard out conspiracy theorists say they are, but they exist. There's dark, so I mean, she's one. There have been others. I mean, yeah, even that conversation I was saying with Q Shaman, for example. Like, I think there's enough common ground there for us not to demonize people like that. Like
they're all humans.
What did he really do? He didn't break anything. He went in there, which is not. Yeah, it wasn't.
Was thousands of people,
but there were riders. He was not a rider. He got very carried away with his ideology, but he didn't hurt anyone. He was just he actually had good intentions. That doesn't make it right, but I think he trespassed. But I don't think he needs to be demonized as much as he was demonized.
The way that he looked, I think, played a part.
For sure.
He stood out. They needed to sort of point the finger and come down on someone, and he happened to be that dude.
Yeah. It was a very serious situation, you know. It was a very serious situation that happened in America at that point in time. A lot of maybe the right-wing people would disagree and say it was overblown. Maybe they're right, maybe they're not. I don't know. I can only make the judgment of what I've seen.
Do you think that something like that would happen again if Trump doesn't win this time?
I reckon it could happen in either way. I think if Kamala wins or Trump wins, I think there could very easily be a bit of mayhem on the streets in America. Feel like they're in a bit of a shaky territory, you know.
Globally, I think there's a lot teetering on the edge at the moment. We've got wars happening. We've got wars almost tipping over that edge of getting a lot of other countries involved. The US is very volatile.
Yeah.
It's just a good thing we're on the other side of the planet, I think.
Yeah, we're in a very, very lucky location. But yeah, you know, look, in their defense, like, you know, the world hasn't gotten any better in the last 4 years. You know, the Ukraine war and Israel-Palestine and the funding that goes into weapons in both of those things by the US is like, look, on one hand, like, there's allies, there's complex decisions that I'm probably not equipped to tackle and fully comprehend, but, you know, like, it's pretty weird when the Ukraine war broke out and America's championing the underdog Ukrainians, which I, you know, probably tend to agree with. They got invaded, but then Israel-Palestine thing happens and they're funding Israel just constantly. And, you know, I mean, God, the images that we saw that came out of that, you know, just fucking horrific.
Yeah.
Like, we're in a new time, and for all the criticisms of social media, I think all that stuff coming out of what was happening in Gaza it was one of the first times where we're being live streamed, just the most horrific things imaginable. And, you know, look,
that's been popping off for a long time.
Yeah,
right?
that's war as well.
In a social media age,
right? That's war as well. Like, it's not to say things like that don't happen in wars. We are just seeing it for the first time, sure. But, like, God damn, I mean, how does America not have healthcare, but they can fund all that wars? Like, that little conundrum right there, I think, is why people are so done with the status quo, so done with the people like, you know, Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or things like that. I get it, but, like, I don't see the alternative particularly optimistic either. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think a lot of politics needs a big overhaul, but they need it more than anyone, I think. You know?
Yeah.
The way that it works it doesn't work.
Yeah, well, yeah, it works for some.
All right, so with the In Too Deep podcast, it's obviously you've been doing it for 5 years now almost.
Yeah, about that. Yep.
So has it taken a direction that you, like, if you could look back when you were a few episodes in, would you think this is where you would be 5 years later?
Nah, not at all. I mean, I remember, like, early on, a year in, and I started getting some good guests, some, you know, notable guests. I remember thinking, like, I wonder what the guest list will look like in 1 year's time. And even to think, like, 5 years' time, you know, some of the small interests, and then speaking to people that are big players in those fields. Yeah, probably couldn't have imagined, actually. Like, yeah, I'm incredibly like I said before, incredibly grateful for all the people that have taken the time to talk with me. It's, like, huge.
How do you, like, do you have a list of guests that you say, one day I'd like to talk to this person, blah, blah, blah? Or is that in your head, or is that physical? It's a physical.
A little bit. It probably, like, it's kind of week by week at the moment. Like, I used to plan much more, and then, yeah, after 5 and a bit years, like, there's other things that take the priority sometimes, like the art career and doing murals. It's very hard to do a podcast a week when you're doing a big fucking...
You do some big murals.
Yeah. Some big ones sometimes. So sometimes it's a 2-week job, and, you know, like, it's just go time. So if you can bank a few beforehand, then you can get some consistent releases. But sometimes I've had to let it drop off for 3, even 4 weeks. There's been a 4-week period where people thought the podcast died, and I'm like, don't worry, I'll be back. But hey, that's the benefit of being your own boss. Like, I was very consistent for quite a few years of doing one a week. I mean, you're doing 2 a week. Like, well done, man. Like,
Cheers.
work ethic second to none there. That's massive, and good for you. But yeah, now I've become a little bit. I try to do 1 a week, but it's more like 3 a month, sometimes 2, and that's okay. Like whatever. Like it's just got to work for me. It's just got to work for me.
Yeah.
It's a free service, so you get what you get, guys.
That's another thing. I think people kind of see streams and stuff, and they go, "Oh, you're making money," but like we said, no one's making money. But
yeah,
I put myself like a high standard on myself to try and do 2 a week because I'm like, and then when 1 week I was sick, I had the flu for a bit, and I only did 1, and I would beat myself up over it, and I'm like, hang on a second, like there's no repercussions to this.
Yeah.
Like why am I so down on myself? You know what I mean? And that's the thing. You just do it when you do it.
I think it's been a very good strategy though for doing 2 a week. I think like if you want to kind of come in, it's good to come in hot. It's good to create a bit of buzz around it, which you definitely have, and I think that's awesome. It's for me, it just became about what's sustainable and just going a bit easier on myself, and spreading myself too thin can always take a down, something else. Some other flower doesn't get watered. You don't want to lose the
love for it, man, as well.
Totally.
So if you treat it like too much of a job, then you know, all right, well, fuck, this is not what it is.
Totally. Yeah, just keep it fun. That would be my advice. I've got no advice on how to get popular and build your platform, but keep it fun.
I think what a lot of people have figured out that are trying to do similar things that whatever you think will work probably won't work as well, and what you don't think will work kind of works,
Yeah.
That seems to be that, and there's no rhyme or reason. It just is what it is.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
The Westall UFO thing.
Oh yeah. So this is where I, reveal myself to still be a hopeless conspiracy theorist.
I think it's not okay. We've come this far as humans that we can say that believing in UFOs or whatever you want to call them isn't even a conspiracy anymore. Surely we've come that far.
I think so. Yeah.
I had a girlfriend about 10 years ago or something, and she wouldn't let me say to her family that I thought that there was aliens. I wasn't allowed to even say that. She's like, don't start doing that. My mum will think you're weird. So, and I feel like in the last 10 years, the stigma behind that has kind of gone. I think most people go, well, of course there's something else out there.
For sure. But how strong is that stigma? How strong is that stigma that they created?
Yeah,
where,
for sure.
Look up at the night sky. Like, it's it's so vast. It's so vast.
Yeah. It's arrogant to think that we are the be all and end all, really, isn't it? It's just arrogance.
Totally. I guess so usually when I speak to people about UFOs or aliens, and it's definitely changed in the last few years with a lot of the revelations that have taken place in whistleblowers in America, and I think there was a congressional hearing and stuff. So the media has changed the mainstream media have changed their tune on it. Still not enough, but they definitely have become more open to destigmatizing the premise. But yeah, most people will say that they, just like what we said, like I definitely don't think we're alone in the universe, but whether they've come to Earth is that's where I don't think it's. But I do think they've come to Earth.
What do you make of the real push to, for lack of a better term, rebrand UFOs to UAP? Like, what is that about, and who fucking pushed that,
Yeah, I've heard a few explanations for that. One was like destigmatizing it. One person, I think I listened to a podcast with Lou Elizondo, which is a big ex-military UFO guy.
People feel two ways about him.
Yeah, I mean, people feel two ways about everyone. It's such a paranoid field, and it's like there's so much misinformation and lies, and it's really weird. And like, I'm also very like, I don't know what they are. I don't know if they're alien. Like, some people get so specific. They say there's like all these different races. There's these Nordic races of aliens. There's these reptilian races of aliens. There's the greys. There's
all different greys.
All different. Yeah, there's like 5 foot grey, or like 3 foot greys. There's the really tall 8 to 10 foot greys. And like, I got no idea. I do think there's like so many stories that I don't think it's silly just to completely dismiss those stories. I think there's just so, like, the more you look, the more the stories there are. I find it really interesting. I think, you know, we don't even know what's on the bottom of the ocean for most of the planet. We haven't even found how many pyramids there are in the Amazon. There's so much on Earth that we have no idea about. There's so much in the universe that we have no idea about. Whether it's government tech, whether it's actual aliens, whether they're interdimensional beings that are popping into existence. I don't know if you've ever done DMT. I've done a bunch of DMT, and there's fucking entities that you'll interact with, man. And is that just all in your head, or are you actually tapping into another realm? I still don't know. But I've had some very weird experiences that would lead my senses to believe that there are entities. Again, I will state I don't know.
With the Westall one, you spoke to the guy who created the doco.
Yes.
And you also...
The researcher. So he the main researcher of... So in short, Westall incident was a mass UFO sighting in Melbourne, in a place called Westall, which was kind of, I think it's the eastern suburbs, out near maybe Clayton, I think. I think it's around there. A little bit out of Melbourne, and I think it was in '66, an entire primary school and
neighbouring high school.
And neighbouring high school, yeah. I think there was two schools. Broad daylight, during lunch break, flying saucers appeared, and I think there was like 2 or 3. And they were hovering and they were zipping around quite close to the school, and all the kids started going like, oh my God. So that's probably one of the things that has really got me very... intrigued about the UFO phenomenon is mass sightings.
And that's one of the biggest ones in the world, and it happened in Melbourne.
Right. There's been some pretty big other ones too. But what I find interesting about ones like the Westall one and other ones around that time is they were quite a long time ago. So that was in '66. So I feel like these days, if there's a flying disc in the sky, I think the odds of it being US or, advanced military technology is probably far more likely than it being an alien. We only know a fraction of what the technology is because that's all they allow us to know, because that's how the military works.
Look at just basic JB Hi-Fi drones these days. If you had one of them back in '65, people would be like, what the fuck is that? It's a flying saucer.
Right. I mean, these days you can get synchronized drones with lights, and they can resemble solid shapes, really large shapes. So there's lots of different trickery. But in '66, to have flying discs zipping around, making 90-degree turns, and then just zipping off. Anyway, it zipped off, and a small group of students jumped the fence, and they ran to this park nearby. That was just a big kind of reserve, nature reserve. And apparently the UFO landed, and they went quite close to it. I think one or two of them got within touching distance of it. There was even one case of, according to this researcher, said there was this one kid on his bike that said he got there as it landed, because the others got there a little bit later, and said he saw some small figures get out of it and get back in. It eventually went back up and zipped off, and apparently very shortly, like within hours, all these, basically men in black, like military people came and basically told all the students that they're not allowed to talk about this. And it was a bit of a media storm, but everyone was instructed to be quiet or they'd fail. And there's a lot of weirdness around it. One girl, she became hysterical, and then apparently very shortly after, her and her family packed up and moved, and no one saw them, like just completely relocated. So this is all true stuff. What it was, we don't know. I've spoken to the researcher. There's lots of newspaper articles. I've spoken to a number of witnesses of the actual discs, one that's on the podcast and a couple. So something happened. Something of the description that I've just laid out happened.
Because the teachers saw it, and students and everybody. Yep.
Yeah, there was no little doubt as to it happening. There's another case in Zimbabwe, which is probably one of the most fascinating ones. There's a documentary about it, where really similar situation. A school, all these kids saw it, no teachers saw it. UFO landed, little men got out. in the documentary, they've got all these like interviews with the children, and like they're creepy. And they all drew pictures of the craft and the men or figures that got out, and they're like the little man with the eyes here, and they're like it's kind of creepy to hear kids talk like that.
Yeah.
Then in the doco, they interview the adults, the kids that have grown up in like now. So there's interviews with the kids in like the 70s or whenever it was, and in like the 2000s, and yeah, they're saying the same thing, and they're saying they never wanted to speak it again. It kind of ruined their lives. People thought they're crazy. So, I mean, I find cases like that fascinating, particularly when they're a long time ago, because I find it far harder to believe that government tech was at that level in the 60s or 70s. I just think like that's pretty advanced. I think we would have seen dribble down into other technology far quicker than now. I think we would have, if governments were in control of that kind of tech. So what it is, I don't know, but I reckon something's up, and there's definitely a conspiracy by the governments to keep whatever it is under wrap. You know, from all accounts, they put it higher than the nuclear, secrets. So yeah, look, I don't know. I don't know if they're aliens. I don't know if there's lots of different theories. They're fun to entertain.
Yeah, for sure.
They're very fun to entertain.
It's a word that's been sort of mentioned a lot lately, but disclosure. People are like, we're getting closer to disclosure. Like they're gonna, and I don't think that the government's going to come out and go, aliens exist. Like they're not going to do that.
Yeah.
But they will get closer to being like, we don't know what it is. We don't. There is stuff in there, and then we will get closer slowly to what people call disclosure. But it's not going to be.
So.
Well, it's not going to just be okay. Media conference today. These aliens are real, and we don't know what they are. They're not going to say that. That's never going to happen, I don't think.
Yeah, maybe. Never say never.
Yeah.
I mean, there was like, the David Grush whistleblower, whenever that was, a year or two ago. He was claiming there's biologics that went with the pilots with some of these crafts. They haven't provided any proof for it. So I, like many people following the subject, is kind of getting a little bit fed up with these really big claims with nothing to back it up. Yeah. There's footage that's come out which is pretty compelling, but apparently even the footage that they have released is only like 10 seconds of a 7-minute video. So yeah, just get on with it, guys. Get on with it. Give us some of the juice.
Yeah. I think, and a lot of people sort of think that maybe that stuff will come out when there's other news to be spoken about, and if that does happen, if there is a big war and then all of a sudden they go, well, this is what's happening, with the disclosure-ish stuff, then that even feeds into the conspiracy theories more, that they did know and they're only telling you when they choose to, when they think it's going to get the least amount of media cycle. Yeah.
Yeah. There's lots of theories that, the disclosure will be done in a way that these are very unfriendly beings, and we need to up our security, and we need to start Space Force, and we need more funding for military. And it's a way of just creating an excuse to get even more paranoid and more militaristic. But again, I don't particularly know or believe. I don't know. It could be. There's a lot of secrecy around the subject. I think it's undeniable that the US government and other governments have secrets surrounding it, whether it's all gaslighting to hide something else or whether it's legit aliens. Don't know, but I've got my ideas. I've got my kooky as hell ideas.
Tell me. What do you think?
Look, I mean, they started playing with the idea of like interdimensional beings. Maybe they're not actually coming from other planets, but they've been here all along. There's the idea of time travelers. Maybe there is a technology of changing the frequency or resonance and popping in and out of timelines or existence, or maybe they're at the bottom of the oceans because there's a lot of undiscovered territory there. Yep. Maybe, I mean, look, again, I don't believe these things, but I find them fun. I mean, like, maybe we are genetically modified chimps by a higher up. There's heaps of great films like that, like Prometheus and stuff, the Alien prequels, which kind of explore those ideas. But like, look, I mean, if you think about, like, we are the most, as far as in our categories of defining intelligence, we are the most intelligent species that's ever existed in existence as far as we can observe. There might be people that would debate that because our intelligence is leading us to self-destruction.
That's the thing.
But nonetheless, we make music. We've got iPhones. We can create holograms. We can do space travel. We can, there's all sorts of crazy technologies that are observably, just undeniably, incredible displays of intelligence. But, like one thing is like, we genetically modify everything. We genetically modified our food, our, animals.
Our humans now.
Yeah. I mean, look at a pug. Like, what the hell is a pug? That was a wolf once. There's everything from the microorganisms we genetically modify. So if there is something that's more advanced than us that has occupied Earth at some point or visited, I think it's not that unlikely that maybe they've tinkered with some genes or not. They're fun ideas.
They are.
They're fun ideas.
The whole thing that humans are a slave race, that's a thing that I think makes a bit of sense as well.
Yeah, I've heard those.
Yeah, there's a lot out there.
Yeah.
And everything except for the really out there ones, you could say, oh, well, that could make sense because we don't know. No one knows.
Yeah.
And the people that think they do know, they're only kidding themselves because no one fucking knows.
Totally. I get wary of people who get super, super specific or claim that they know, because, Look, I've heard some very good explanations in some podcasts over the last year that have given me pause to even reconsider some of the mass sighting or UFO sighting examples that I was very certain were unexplainable, probably aliens that maybe they could just actually have been government tech. The Phoenix Lights would be probably the one that I've always been most fascinated with. I think it was in the 90s in the city of Phoenix, Arizona.
Where the mayor brought out the fake alien.
That's the one.
That's so bizarre.
Oh, no, totally.
It's fucking weird.
But basically this like enormous boomerang shaped, like triangular, but kind of boomerang shaped. It wasn't a solid triangle. It was like that. Just silently drifted over entire city. Like the whole city saw it, more or less. I think it was like 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock. So enough people were still awake, and it had 5 lights underneath it, just cruised across the city and disappeared.
Silently.
Yeah, silently. I mean, I've been very convinced that has got to be an alien craft for very long. But I heard a podcast with some guy claiming that it was government tech, and he pulled up these kind of like... again, who knows what's in misinformation or not, but he pulled up these things and it was just an alternative explanation saying it was actually some kind of experimental craft that was a balloon, that it was actually inflated, still had motors and electronics in it that would cruise. That would be why it was silent, and that's why it could also disappear. Like if it finally gets away and lands, they can deflate it, pack it up, and then...
What's the motivation to bring that out in the middle of 10 o'clock
Who knows? Yeah. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it drifted off course. Maybe it was. Maybe they need somewhere to test, and a desert in America is viable. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. But again, like we do know that it happened. We do know that something really weird happened.
The US has a lot of those sort of stories. There's also the Battle of LA, I think.
What's that one?
They reckon there was.
It's so fun.
I'm pretty sure it was a long time ago. I don't know when. Maybe like in the maybe in the 70s or 80s, and it was like there was a lot of action going on in the sky, like dogfights and all this sort of stuff. And I don't know. We'll have to look that one up. The US seems to have a lot of this stuff that kind of happens. You know what I mean? More than the rest of the world, or they're just. Maybe their military is more involved. Maybe other countries are sending their stuff there to try and get some information. It seems to be very US focused, though.
Yeah. Well, I guess they've got the biggest military in the world, Like, they've got the biggest military, they've got the funding, and they've got the secrecy. So when something happens in another country, they just kind of zip in and go, we'll take it from here. There's a lot of really cool documentaries that has definitely made me think twice. But again, you got to be careful of getting too carried away. I'm first to admit I get very carried away with these subjects. I'm still not immune to falling down the rabbit hole, people.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, we probably should wrap it up. But it's been a great chat, man.
Been awesome, man.
I'd love you to come in again and talk more stuff because there's a lot we could talk about.
Yeah, man, for sure. Would any time would love to. It's been a pleasure, and I'd love to have you on Into Deep if you're ever available.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, just another thing, man. Just want to say a big congratulations to you for building this excellent podcast. Work ethic second to none, and yeah, it's cool. It's just great to see more of this stuff happening in Melbourne. So kudos to you, brother.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, there's a few of us that are doing similar stuff, and I just want to see everybody fucking take their platform in a direction that everyone's sort of doing what they want to do. And that's not necessarily going to be in the form of monetary stuff, but just building that platform to what you want to do and to get the guests on and to build the content that you're happy with. So hopefully we can all get it done.
Yeah, that's it.
That's the plan.
For sure.
Jack, thanks for coming in, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you, brother. And thanks, really appreciate it.
3,000.